What is up, ladies and gents? I thought I would do a little review of this year's Mrs. Brown's Boys Christmas special, which aired on Christmas Day, as it does every year. Now, let's face it, I've tried to defend, the show most years. Over the last few years, when they've had the Christmas specials and people have criticised them and said, oh, they weren't that good. They could have been miles better, blah, 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 blah. I tried to defend the episode and say, well, actually, they weren't that bad for the most part. But I feel like that this year there is no defending this year's Christmas episode. It was so bad. It's probably up there as one of the worst Mrs. Brown's Boys episodes I've watched in a long time. I remember when the series first started, it used to be so good, like the episodes were so good. But now it feels like it's going a little bit down the pan, like it's just not as funny as it used to be, it's not as good as it used to be. A lot of people aren't really enjoying the episodes as much as they used to, because they're not that good. I don't think there was anybody who was willing to actually defend the Mrs. Brown's Boys Christmas special this year and actually say it was any good, because it actually was not. There was not one single part of this year's Christmas special I actually thought was was funny. I feel like the only part I laughed at was at the end when the Christmas tree exploded. I think that was the only time I laughed throughout the whole episode. Normally I'd be laughing through literally a whole episode, but this year it was different. I wasn't laughing at all until towards the end with the Christmas tree bit. It's just, as I said, last few years I have tried to defend the Mrs. Brown's Boys Christmas specials and say, oh well, actually they weren't that bad. But I can't say that this year because they were awful, because it was awful. It was absolutely terrible this year. It's like, how did they think that people would actually enjoy that episode? It was garbage, for the most part. There was nothing good about this year's episode from Mrs. Brown's Boys at all. At all, there was nothing good about it. It's just I wish there was something good, and there was something positive I could say about the episode, but there isn't. It was just garbage for the most part. I know, to be honest, I know that there are some people who might think I'm being a little bit harsh by saying that this year's Christmas episode was absolute garbage and it wasn't any good, but for the most part it wasn't too bad. Like, for the most part it was, it was garbage. I don't feel like I'm being too harsh for saying this episode was garbage and was not even that good. Because if truth be told, it wasn't. It was never going to be that good. It was never, it was never that good. I feel like it's been a few years since, the Christmas specials were actually that good. I feel like I enjoyed Mrs. Brown's Boys more when Rory and Dino were in it. I think that was when the episodes were actually better. But since it feels like it's gone down the pan a little bit since Rory and Dino left. It feels like Mrs. Brown's Boys just hasn't been the same without them, in a way. I think, hopefully the New Year's Day special will be a good episode. But I'm not getting my hopes up, considering how bad this episode was. It doesn't get me excited for the New Year's Day episode, because I fear that the New Year's Day episode will be just as bad as the episode that went out on Christmas, that was on BBC One on Christmas Day, which was an absolute travesty. It was probably, and was an absolute, and was, a below par effort at best. if I had to score this year's Christmas special out of 10, I would say a 3. And I feel like even that's being generous, scoring it a 3 out of 10. But, you know, I feel like I can't rate it any higher than that, or score it any higher than that, because it was so bad. You know, I wish I could score it more than that, but I feel like I can't score it more than that, because it was genuinely terrible, it was genuinely garbage. You know, and it's sad to be saying that about a show that used to be so good, and a show in which its Christmas episode used to be really good, to be saying that this year's Christmas episode was absolute garbage. Because I remember once upon a time, Mrs. Brown's Boys used to be one of the most watched things on Christmas Day. But the viewership numbers for this year, the viewership number ratings for this year's Christmas special have dropped significantly. And it's not hard to see why. You know, I mean, even when you compare it to other shows that aired on Christmas Day, like Gavin and Stacey, Wallace and Gromit, Vengeance Most Foul, you know, it didn't do anywhere. I don't feel like it did anywhere near as good as those shows did. You know, I think we always knew that the Gavin and Stacey special was going to be probably one of the most watched episodes on Christmas Day. And it was like one of the most watched shows on Christmas Day, and it was. I mean, not all the mid-right Christmas episodes weren't too bad. Obviously, I like how they kind of had it split into 2 parts this year. So you have part 1 on Christmas Day, part 2 on Boxing Day. The standard Christmas episodes have been pretty good again this year as well, aren't they, on that? But Mrs. Brown's Boys, just a pure disappointment this year with that episode. Like, really, you know, considering how much I tried to defend the show in previous years, when people have said that the Christmas episodes were garbage, I feel like it's impossible for me to defend it this year because it was genuinely trash. You know, and I never thought I would be saying that, but, you know, unfortunately I can't say any different this year, because I think, to be honest, if I tried to defend the Mrs. Brown's Boys Christmas episode this year, I'd be making myself look like a complete and utter idiot. And people would probably be saying to me, how can you defend an episode? If I was to try and defend Mrs. Brown's Boys and actually say, let me restart. If I was to try and defend the Christmas special, the Mrs. Brown's Boys Christmas special this year, and try to say that it wasn't so bad, I think people would think I was mad. People would probably be thinking, like, how can I defend the episode when it was so bad? Which is why I'm not going down that route this year, because I don't want to have people taking shots at me for, and questioning why I'm defending the Mrs. Brown's Boys Christmas episode when it was so bad. Normally I would say I think people are being, normally in previous years I have said I thought people were being too harsh. I think people needed to be more lenient. People needed to be, to stop being so critical. But this year, I feel like people were really critical for good reason. I feel like people had perfectly good reasons to be critical of this year's Christmas episode, because it was spectacularly awful. It was beyond shit this year. And I never thought I would say that for a Mrs. Brown's Boys Christmas episode. I never thought I'd be saying that a Mrs. Brown's Boys Christmas episode was dot shit, or was actually dot crap. But unfortunately, it was dot crap this year. And then there is no, at the end of the day, there is no defending it. There is no defending the fact that there is no defending this year's Christmas episode. It was dot crap. I mean, my uncle was trying to do it last night. Like, as I said to him, him and my aunt came round for Boxing Day yesterday, and I said to him, the Mrs. Brown's Boys Christmas episode was garbage. And he said to me, well, I actually thought it was pretty good. And I was like, how do you think that episode was pretty good? It wasn't pretty good, it was pretty bad. It was pretty awful. It wasn't pretty good. It was pretty awful and pretty bad, for the most part. Like, come on, dude. I mean, the fact the audacity to say that. Oh, I don't think it was actually that bad. I think it was pretty good. No, it wasn't. It was absolutely awful. You know, and this is coming from somebody that actually tried to defend the show in previous years when people criticised it. I'm not defending it this year though, because it was absolute dog crap, and I'm perfect, and I'm actually willing to say that because, you know, I'm saying it as it is this year. I'm not defending the Mrs. Brown's Christmas special this year. I might have done that in previous years, but this year that's not gonna happen because it was just so bad. I wish I could defend it, but I can't because I don't think anybody can. Realistically, I don't think anyone could even defend the show, could even defend the episode this year because it was trash. And I am expecting a few negative comments on this video from people saying, well, why are you being so harsh towards the show? But the reason is the episode this year was crap. You know, literally it was crap. I mean, the Mrs. Brown's Boys Christmas episodes are supposed to be funny, but this one wasn't. It was boring. It was stale, it was lifeless. It just wasn't funny. And that's what ruined it for me, is it just wasn't funny this year. You know, that's what a Mrs. Brown's Boys episode is supposed to be. It is a comedy show, it's supposed to be funny. But the last few years, it's not been funny. Last year's Christmas episode was a little bit depressing, to be fair. Christmas Day was a little bit depressing, for the most part. It was more sad than it was funny. It was more kind of emotional than it was funny. This year's episode was basically a stale as fuck. There wasn't a single funny part in it. Well, apart from the end, of course, when the Christmas tree exploded. That was the only funny part, for me. You know, the whole episode. And it's sad to say that, you know, to say that the episodes are not as funny as they used to be, but they're not. You have to be brutally, I had to be brutally honest. You know, I wish this had been a more, I was hoping this was going to be a more positive review, but unfortunately, I have to say it as it is, this year's episode failed terribly. You know, it wasn't any good this year. And if you haven't already seen it, I would say give it a miss. Don't even bother watching it because it's not even worth watching. You know, don't make that mistake of watching it because it's just not worth it. It's bad. You know, I mean, I'd love to hear, other people's opinions on what they thought of the Mrs. Brown's Boys Christmas special this year and whether they thought it was any good. You know, one day I wonder if you guys did, maybe you guys did think it was, pretty good for the most part, but I didn't. I thought it was trash. So that's my general review. I hope you've enjoyed it. This wasn't intended to be a long video. I wasn't going to do a long video ranting about it, but yeah, that's it for today. I will see you for another video soon. Bye bye.